Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Boring Historians. I'm so grateful you've decided to join me once again on this peaceful journey through time. Whether you're winding down for the night, looking for a moment of calm in your busy day, or just here to escape into the past, I'm here to guide you through the soothing whispers of history. Before we begin, I have a small request. Nothing too demanding, I promise. If you find comfort in these stories and would like to join our growing community of dreamers, kindly hit the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll ensure you never miss another tranquil adventure where history and relaxation intertwine perfectly. And while you're here, why not take a moment to leave a gentle comment? I'd love to know where you're listening from, and if you like, what time it is for you right now. It's always such a delight to see how our peaceful community spans across the world, whether it's the break of dawn or the quiet hours of night. Now take a deep breath, find your most comfortable spot, and let your worries fade away as we begin our journey together. Let the quiet rhythm of history soothe you as we explore another forgotten chapter of the past, slowly, gently, and peacefully. Tonight, we turn back the dusty pages of time to explore a most intimate and awe-inspiring chapter in the human experience, the miracle of life as it unfolded in the medieval world. Tonight's story will unfold slowly, like mist drifting across a moonlit field, and we invite you to listen with ease, letting each word draw you deeper into a peaceful slumber. So lie back, rest your eyes, and breathe deeply as we wander through the candle-lit corridors of medieval homes, monasteries, and birthing chambers, where generations were conceived, carried, and brought into the world with hope, mystery, and more than a little fear. In the medieval imagination, conception was a divine, mystical union, a mingling of spiritual and physical forces far beyond the reach of mere mortals. While they did have some ideas about anatomy and biology, much of their understanding was colored by theology, astrology, and ancient Greek philosophy. In the early Middle Ages, it was widely believed that a child was created through the blending of two essential substances, the man's seed and the woman's menstrual blood. This idea, found in the writings of Galen and Hippocrates, shaped much of medical thinking in Europe for centuries. But there were other theories as well. The Aristotelian model, popular in scholastic circles, claimed that the man's seed provided the active form, while the woman's body offered the passive matter. The woman was the fertile field, and the man the sower of divine purpose. But conception was never simply about biology. It was also about timing, stars, humors, and virtue. Astrologers were often consulted to determine the most auspicious time to conceive a child. Certain alignments of the planets, especially the Moon and Venus, were said to bless a union with fertility. If the stars were unkind, even the most passionate lovers might be left wanting. Then there was the matter of humors, the ancient belief that the body was governed by four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A fertile woman, it was said, was warm and moist in temperament. A man, ideally, was hot and dry. Too much coldness or excess melancholy could render one barren. So when a couple sought to create life, they didn't merely join their bodies. They aligned themselves with nature, the heavens, and the will of God. Let us now drift into the echoing halls of medieval castles and peasant cottages alike, where men and women came together in matrimony, and the quiet hope for children stirred gently in their hearts. Marriage in the Middle Ages was not merely a romantic affair, but a social contract, a sacred union often arranged by families, sealed with dowries and lands, vows and blessings. For noble families, the pressure to produce an heir was immense. A lineage without a successor could lose titles, lands, and sometimes even its place in the noble order. The wedding night was thus not just a celebration, but a moment of solemn anticipation. In the candle-lit bedchamber, newlyweds lay down together for the first time, often watched or blessed by attendants to ensure the consummation of their vows. These acts were not prurient, but profoundly serious, entwined with inheritance, legitimacy, and faith. In quiet cottages and village homes, too, the hope for children whispered between husband and wife. There was prayer and folk magic, and countless charms whispered into the ear or embroidered into cloth. Some believed that if a woman wore a particular stone, like carnelian or moonstone, fertility would be assured. Others drank brews made from rue, fennel, or mugwort to strengthen the womb and invite the seed to stay. As you breathe softly now, imagine these humble rituals, the careful prayers at the bedside, the flicker of hearthlight, the shared longing for new life to take root. When a woman missed her bleeding, and the moon had come and gone with no sign of it, a quiet wonder would stir in her heart. Pregnancy, though often welcome, brought with it great uncertainty and risk. There were no ultrasounds, no tests. Instead, women relied on signs, stories, and the wisdom of midwives. Was her skin glowing? Were her dreams strange or vivid? Did her cravings turn toward odd things, chalk, clay, or salted fish? These, and many more, were believed to be signs that a child was growing within. The womb, a sacred and mysterious place, was believed to be a vessel that could move and shift within the body. Some thought it wandered when unanchored, a belief called the wandering womb. But once a child had taken hold, the womb would settle like a dove nesting among branches. As the belly grew, so too did the attention and care. Pregnant women were urged to avoid strong emotions, bad smells, and loud noises, lest they disturb the child's spirit. They were told to gaze upon beautiful things, listen to gentle music, and speak only sweetly, for it was believed that the mother's thoughts, even her imagination, could shape the unborn child. To dream of fire might mean a boy, of water, a girl, though such dreams were open to interpretation and always subject to the wisdom of elders. Physicians, too, were consulted, but midwives more often held the trust of women. Learned through practice, their hands knew the signs of swelling, the rhythms of pain, the softening of the womb. And as the days passed into months, and the moon cycled round once more, the moment of birth would draw near. As the final weeks of pregnancy slipped by like mist over meadows, the medieval woman would prepare for the sacred trial ahead. Labor. Birth was a threshold moment, mysterious, feared, and holy. In castles and cottages alike, a special space would be created, known as the lying-in chamber. The room would be darkened, the shutters closed tight, to guard against wandering spirits and the evil eye. Only the warm glow of firelight and beeswax candles illuminated the space. Within this room, only women were allowed. Men, even fathers, were turned away. The mother was surrounded by a circle of midwives, female relatives, and sometimes wise women. those who carried the knowledge of generations in their calloused hands and calm voices. The air would be filled with murmured prayers, sometimes incantations. Charms were whispered, such as "Jesu, Maria, help me now," and the invocation of Saint Margaret of Antioch, the patron saint of childbirth, said to have been swallowed by a dragon and emerged unharmed. In the corner of the room, perhaps hung from a wooden beam or laid across the birthing bed, there might be a holy relic or a parchment inscribed with the girdle of Our Lady, a prayerful talisman believed to ease labor pains and ensure safe delivery. The woman would be seated on a birthing stool or supported in a half-reclined position, depending on local custom. Midwives listened closely to her cries and watched her body, interpreting signs passed down over centuries. There was no anesthesia, of course. Instead, laboring women were given herbal concoctions to dull the pain, mixtures of poppy seed, henbane, or sweetened wine infused with herbs like valerian, lemon balm, or motherwort. Sometimes she was encouraged to bite down on a piece of leather to release the agony of the contraction without harming herself. And when the time came, when the baby began to crown, a hush would fall over the room. The midwife would gently guide the infant into the world, whispering prayers, cradling the slick, trembling form with both urgency and reverence. If all went well, the cry of a newborn would rise, sharp and alive, like a chime struck in the silence. But birth was not always safe. Many women did not survive. Maternal mortality was high, and prayers for protection were constant. The presence of saints was believed to intercede. Saint Anne, Saint Bridget, and especially the Virgin Mary herself. Yet for those who survived, there was relief, there was joy, there was weeping. The cord was cut. The child washed in warm water and swaddled in linen. The mother, pale and shaking, was laid down to rest, her lips kissed by those who had prayed her through the fire of childbirth. As soon as the child was born, time began to run swiftly. For in the medieval Christian worldview, unbaptized souls could not enter heaven. Baptism was urgent. If a child appeared weak or sickly, the midwife might perform an emergency baptism using clean water and the sacred words "Ego te baptizo" to ensure salvation. Otherwise, the infant would be taken to church within days, sometimes even the very day of birth. Wrapped tightly and carried by godparents, the baby was brought to the baptismal font. Salt might be placed on the tongue to symbolize purity. Oil was rubbed on the chest and forehead in anointing. The child was given a Christian name, often a saint's name, to act as protector and guide. This name was sacred. It linked the infant to a divine lineage and sealed their place in the Christian world. Following baptism, some traditions allowed a celebration. There might be bread, honey, cheese, and perhaps a bit of ale shared among the gathered women, though the mother herself remained in her lying-in chamber, not yet restored to full participation in community or church life. For 30 to 40 days after childbirth, the new mother would remain secluded in rest, in what was called the lying-in period. During this time, she was considered vulnerable, physically weak, and spiritually liminal. She hovered between the worlds of life and death, having walked so close to both. Visitors were few. Meals were brought quietly. She might be offered nourishing soups, warm milk, and stews made with healing herbs like sage, thyme, or yarrow. Her body was carefully tended. Poultices were applied. Compresses soaked in rose water or chamomile were pressed against tender places. The room was kept warm and still. If she had torn or bled excessively, special prayers were said, and remedies from herbals were employed, salves made from beeswax and lavender, or teas brewed from comfrey and nettle to rebuild strength. Only when the appointed time had passed, and she felt strong again, would she go to the church for the ritual of churching, a blessing that symbolically reintroduced her to society. In a quiet corner of the church, the priest would say a short prayer of thanksgiving and protection. This was not penance, but purification, a marker that she had returned from the edge of the unknown and was once again whole. The midwife was one of the most respected and also most feared women in medieval society. She held life and death in her hands. She was the one who knelt beside the birthing stool, who knew when to wait and when to act, who whispered to the unborn and comforted the mothers. Midwives learned through apprenticeship. Their knowledge was practical, passed down from elder to younger, refined over years of observation and experience. In some towns, they were officially appointed by local councils or bishops. In others, they served informally as part of the village's oldest traditions. They carried with them not only herbs and oils, but sacred relics, prayers, and charms. At times, however, their power drew suspicion. Midwives were sometimes accused of witchcraft, especially if a child died or a mother failed to recover. They walked a fine line between reverence and fear. But for the women who called upon them, they were often beloved. Their names were remembered, their hands praised. They stayed by the bedside, long after the candles burned low. And now, the child is born. The church has spoken, and the mother is wrapped in rest. The home is quieter now. The rush of labor has passed, and the only sound that echoes softly across the wooden floorboards is the gentle breath of a newborn. The cradle, lovingly carved by father or family, stood close to the bed. Rocked gently with the foot or hand, it swayed like a boat upon a still river. The baby was wrapped tightly in swaddling bands, long strips of linen meant to keep the child's limbs straight and warm. This practice, widespread in medieval Europe, was believed to protect the baby from injury and to guide proper growth. As the cradle creaked, mothers would hum soft lullabies, songs passed down from voice to voice, some sacred, some playful. Let your breath slow now, and imagine that lullaby drifting through a quiet room. Perhaps something like this. Lulle, lulle, little child, thy father guards thee, meek and mild. Thy mother sings thee fast asleep, while angels near thy cradle peep. Take a deep breath in, and let it go slowly, like a hush of wind through old trees. This was a time for gentle wonder, a time to savor each yawn and tiny fist, each flicker of eyelids and stretch of small toes. Mothers stroked cheeks, whispered prayers, and thanked the saints for safe delivery. To hold a child in the stillness of night was to glimpse something eternal. In the medieval world, nourishment came first and foremost from the mother's breast. Breastfeeding was not only natural, it was holy. The image of the Virgin Mary nursing the Christ child, called the Maria Lactans, was a symbol of comfort and divine grace. Mothers were encouraged to nurse their own infants for at least a year if they could. But not all were able, and in noble households it was common to employ a wet nurse, a woman chosen for her health, virtue, and calm temperament. It was believed that a mother's mood and character could be passed into her milk, And so wet nurses were carefully vetted. A kind heart, a peaceful home, and even a cheerful face were considered essential. Let yourself rest now, listener. Let the thought of warm milk, soft skin, and candlelight settle your heart. Herbs like fennel and anise were taken to increase milk flow, while sage and mint were believed to dry it when weaning began. These remedies were simple, passed down by midwives and grandmothers, and always wrapped in lore. Feeding a child was not only physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and communal. It was love, in its most tender form. The medieval world was full of dangers, illness, hunger, cold, but also unseen things, spirits, curses, and shadows that moved just beyond the edge of the firelight. To protect their children, parents turned to charms and traditions. A piece of coral might be tied to the cradle to ward off the evil eye. Amulets made of wolf's teeth or small crosses were stitched into clothes or tucked beneath pillows. Mothers sometimes made the sign of the cross over the child's chest or forehead as they slept. And always there were songs. Let your thoughts float gently now, like feathers on a slow breeze, as we remember some of those cradle tunes. Sleep, baby, sleep. Thy cradle is soft. The stars in the sky are watching aloft. Singing was seen as both soothing and sacred. Even a poor mother in a simple hut could offer her baby the most precious gift, the rhythm of her breath, the hum of her heart, the whisper of love wrapped in melody. Breathe slowly now, in and out, letting each word carry you further into rest. But not every cradle stayed full, and not every lullaby ended in peace. Infant mortality in the medieval world was tragically high. Many children died in the first few months of life, of fever, of infection, of causes unknown and unnamed. When a child passed, the family mourned deeply. Even in an age where death was common, the loss of a child left a hole in the heart. Mothers wept quietly. Fathers fell into silence. The tiny body would be wrapped in linen and gently laid to rest, often near the churchyard or sometimes beneath the family hearth, in keeping with local custom. And yet, there was hope. The child, baptized and pure, was believed to go straight to heaven. There, they would become one of the innocents, eternal playmates of the angels. It was said that in dreams, grieving mothers might feel the touch of small hands or hear distant laughter and take comfort in knowing that their little one had found peace. Let your breath slow and your thoughts float away like petals on a stream. Let the pain pass and the peace remain. Though we've spoken much of England and France, every region of medieval Europe had its own traditions. In Italy, women tied red ribbons to their beds to protect mother and child from curses. In Scandinavia, midwives were called jordemødre, or earth mothers, and often invoked the protection of elves and house spirits. In Byzantium, incense was burned and holy water sprinkled at birth to chase away demons. In Ireland, children born with a caul, a membrane over the face, were considered lucky and destined for greatness, no matter the place. The rituals changed, but the love remained. Across mountains, rivers, and seas, parents rocked their children in the dark hours of night, sang lullabies, and whispered blessings into soft ears. So let your mind wander now, through olive groves and mountain passes, along cobbled streets and snow-covered fields, where mothers and fathers across centuries cradled the same gentle hope. Rest now, and return with me to the birthing chamber. The fire crackles low, the room smells of beeswax and thyme, and the air hums with quiet tension. Labor in the medieval world was as varied as the landscapes it occurred in. Yet common threads wove through every corner of Europe, methods passed from mother to midwife, from prayer book to herb garden, birthing positions and practices. Contrary to modern assumptions, birthing on the back was not the universal norm. In many medieval societies, upright positions were favored. This allowed gravity to assist and gave the midwife clearer access. Women might sit on a birthing stool, a low three-legged chair with a hole in the center. Midwives knelt between the mother's legs to catch the child. Kneel upright, supported by a servant or female relative, clutching a piece of knotted cloth or bedpost for strength. Lean forward onto a table or a large cushion, especially during contractions, with the midwife watching for the crowning of the head. The birthing stool, often reserved for nobility or the well-to-do, symbolized both dignity and ritual. It was often brought out only for the act of delivery, then carefully cleaned and stored. Some stools were ornately carved, while others were humble wood. In rural cottages, poor women might simply give birth on rush-covered floors, wrapped in blankets, aided only by a neighbor or older sister. Let your breathing slow. As we sit beside the fire, watching a midwife kneel with calm hands, her voice a steady murmur of reassurance. To help labor along, certain herbs were used, whispered of in the pages of old medical texts and women's manuals. Pennyroyal, thought to stimulate contractions. Blue cohosh, used in folk medicine for centuries to ease the birth canal. Raspberry leaf, brewed as a tea to tone the uterus. Rue and mugwort, applied as compresses to the lower belly or used in steam baths. Even ritual objects might be used. A ring of St. Margaret worn on the finger, or a girdle blessed by monks tied around the laboring woman's waist. If labor stalled, the midwife might gently uncross the mother's fingers or legs, believing that any knots or crossings in the room symbolically tied up the birth. The air was filled with meaning. Nothing was random. Every breath, every fold of cloth held significance. Now rest your limbs and imagine the scent of herbs and hot water, the sound of rain on a cottage roof, and the midwife's soft chant, part prayer, part lullaby. The act of birth was wrapped in mystery and myth. In an age without scientific explanations, people turned to the world of spirit and symbol. Here are just some of the fascinating folk traditions whispered in birthing chambers. No metal tools were to be brought into the birthing room unnecessarily, as iron might attract spirits. If a child was born feet first, it was believed they would grow into a powerful traveler or messenger, one always between worlds. Babies born during a storm were thought to have strong lungs and mighty fates, a child of thunder. A woman who ate honey before labor was said to give birth to a sweet-natured child. Cats were both feared and revered in birthing rooms. Some believed their presence brought ease. Others feared they might steal a newborn's breath. Let these old tales wrap around you like an old quilt. Let the hush of time draw you in as we wander deeper into the mist of forgotten belief. Of all the saints invoked during childbirth, St. Margaret of Antioch was the most beloved. Her legend became a beacon of courage for laboring women. It was said she was swallowed whole by a terrible dragon, the devil in disguise. Yet with her crucifix in hand, she burst forth from the dragon's belly, unharmed, reborn into light. Because of this miraculous tale, her name was spoken in labouring rooms. Women wore amulets of Saint Margaret, or read from the Liber de Nativitate Sanctae Mariae, which included stories of her trials. Midwives might recite a prayer. Saint Margaret, as you burst from the beast, let this child come forth with no pain, with no fear, with peace. Let this tale carry you gently through firelight and candle smoke, into sleep, where dragons are conquered and mothers hold their children close. The stars, too, played their part. Some believed that the day and hour of birth shaped the child's destiny. A child born during a waxing moon might grow strong, while one born during a waning moon might be quiet and thoughtful. Midwives and wise women often consulted almanacs, noting the phase of the moon, the day of the week, even the direction of the wind. A child born on a Sunday was lucky and joyful. A Tuesday child might be headstrong and brave. A Friday birth was sacred, marked by love and beauty. These beliefs wove identity into time, made each birth a divine signature. Close your eyes, dear listener, and imagine a newborn held aloft beneath a starlit window, the breath of midnight brushing the child's cheek, the stars whispering secrets that only the angels understand. Let your eyes grow heavy and your heart grow still as we journey further into the old world, where mystery and motherhood walk hand in hand. Beneath every cradle, beneath every prayer, there lived a tale. The womb tree of Avalon. In the mist-veiled lands of medieval Britain, it was whispered that deep within the sacred Isle of Avalon, there stood a great tree, known only to women as the womb tree. Its roots burrowed into the earth like veins, and its blossoms bore fruit that shimmered like moonstone. They said that pregnant women, especially those in peril, might dream of the womb tree. In their visions, they would rest beneath its branches, laying their hands upon its bark and drawing strength. And if they saw a fruit fall from its limbs into their lap, it meant the child would be born safely, a daughter of Avalon, blessed by the old powers. Such stories gave comfort to women in hard labor, who gripped the bedpost and whispered, "Mother of Avalon, wrap thy roots round me." Let yourself drift into that vision. The warm wind through silver leaves, the hush of hidden waters, and the fruit of life glowing softly in the dark. In the wooded highlands of medieval Scotland, people told of a midwife summoned one night by a cloaked stranger. She followed him into the moors, where time slowed and the stars blinked in unfamiliar patterns. She entered a home unlike any she'd seen, carved from hillside, lit with moss fire. There, a beautiful woman lay in labor. The midwife did her work, careful, kind, and quiet. The child was born glowing, with eyes like liquid gold, and before she could speak, the mother kissed her hand and whispered, "You've delivered a child of the cedar. You may go, but remember, speak not of what you've seen, or your tongue shall twist forevermore." The midwife returned before dawn, her heart full, her lips sealed. In villages across the British Isles, such stories warned that the Fey folk took great interest in childbirth. To protect babies from fairy mischief, mothers would hang rowan branches above the cradle, place cold iron shears beneath the bed, leave bread and milk on the doorstep as a peaceful offering. Even today, in remote places, some of these customs linger, softened by time, but never forgotten. And now, let your breath fall gentle again, like moss over stone, and listen for the soft footfall of unseen visitors. In Ireland, mothers feared the changeling, a fairy child swapped for a human one. If a baby cried too long or looked strangely wise, some believed the fae had taken the true child. To test the infant, the mother might lay out 9 iron nails in a circle around the cradle, place a mirror before the child's face, for fae children cast no true reflection, or sprinkle ashes across the floor and look for unnatural footprints in the morning. But these were not done in hatred, only fear of losing something too precious. And so Irish women often hung tiny silver bells near their babies, believing their chiming would drive away mischief. Let the sound of bells calm you now, delicate and bright, like distant stars whispering protection. In the villages of France and the Low Countries, there existed a tradition called la chandelle de la mère, the mother's candle. When a woman went into labor, a tall beeswax candle was lit and placed at the foot of her bed. This flame was not to go out, for it was said to guard against spirits, bad luck, and wandering souls that might seek entry as the child entered the world. The flame's dance was watched carefully. If it flickered wildly, some believed twins were coming. If it sputtered low, the mother needed strength. If it shone steady and bright, the room was blessed. After a successful birth, the candle was often wrapped in linen and placed beneath the mother's bed for 7 days. Let the glow of that ancient flame warm you, flickering across a stone wall, lighting the face of a newborn, and guiding your thoughts gently towards slumber. There was once a tale in German-speaking lands of a barren woman who prayed every night to Saint Anne, the mother of the Virgin Mary. One evening she dreamt she stood in a vast garden filled with red and white roses. She reached for a white blossom, and as she touched it, it turned into a small child swaddled in silk. Saint Anne appeared beside her and said, "You shall bloom as this garden blooms. The child you long for will come with the moon." Sure enough, within a month the woman conceived, and the villagers who heard her tale began planting roses outside their windows, especially white ones, symbols of hopeful conception and divine grace. Now breathe in and let that garden bloom in your mind. Feel the petals brush your skin and the quiet promise of new life carried on the breeze. In the hill towns of Calabria and Sicily, old women told of a tree older than time, an olive tree that bore children instead of fruit. They said a woman desperate to conceive might, in a dream or vision, find herself standing before this tree in twilight. She would reach up and pluck a single olive, which, when pressed to her lips, would dissolve into warmth and light. Soon after, her womb would quicken. If her child was born healthy and peaceful, the mother would return to the tree in her dreams and offer thanks. Midwives, too, made use of olive branches. Tied in bundles and hung above the door, they were said to protect the newborn from the evil glance, that sharp stare that could curse a child with colic or misfortune. And so olive oil was used not just in cooking, but for blessing the newborn's forehead, tracing the sign of the cross, lubricating the birth canal, a common midwife's trick, lighting tiny lamps that were kept burning for 3 nights after birth. Sleep now with the scent of warm oil in the air, and imagine the golden lamp flame flickering softly in a stone cottage, keeping watch beside a mother and her babe. In the dark woods of medieval Poland, Ukraine, and Russia, people believed in protective spirits called domashne, house guardians, and rodzianicy, ancient female ancestors who watched over childbirth. When a child was born, bread, salt, and water were left on the windowsill to welcome the Rodianici. A red thread was tied to the cradle's leg to ward off evil spirits. A clay figurine of Zemlya Mat, Earth Mother, was sometimes buried beneath the hearth, connecting the child to the soil and soul of the home. Fathers were not permitted near the baby for 3 days. During this liminal period, it was believed the infant's spirit was still soft, not yet fully anchored to the world. One folktale tells of a mother who lost 3 babies in a row. On the 4th night after a birth, she saw a pale woman enter the house through the chimney. The spirit reached for the cradle, but the red thread shimmered like fire, and the ghost vanished into the night. From that day on, no child in that village slept without a thread, a prayer, and a kiss upon the brow. Let your mind rest now beneath pine branches and old starlight, the hush of snow outside, and a guardian spirit at your window, keeping watch. In the ancient heart of Constantinople, a wealthy woman once dreamt that her unborn son would be a great philosopher, but cursed to die before he spoke his first words. Desperate to break this fate, she visited a midwife known only as Mira of the Scrolls. Mira instructed her to wrap her belly nightly in a length of silk inscribed with prayers, written backward to confuse the fates. Each line of script, embroidered in silver thread, spoke of holy wisdom, maternal strength, and celestial protection. On the night of the birth, Mira unrolled the silk into the fire, releasing the prayers into the smoke. The child was born silent. But on his 7th day, he opened his mouth and spoke a verse of ancient Greek. His fate had been rewritten. To this day, mothers in that region tied embroidered cloth around their bellies, often bearing icons of the Virgin Mary or phrases from Psalms, as a sacred shield against pain, loss, and the uncertainty of birth. Feel the coolness of silk now, the weight of silver thread on your skin, and the quiet murmur of ancient tongues in the room where life begins. In medieval Persian and Arab lands, childbirth was seen as a time when the veil between worlds thinned. Jinn, powerful, unseen beings, were believed to linger near newborns, drawn by their purity and light. To protect mother and child, a knife or iron needle was placed under the pillow, not to be used, but to ward off malevolent spirits. Quranic verses were written on slips of paper and tucked into the swaddling cloth. The room was perfumed with frankincense or myrrh, scents said to blind the jinn's senses. In one tale, a woman alone in labor called out to the Lady of the Oasis, a desert spirit known to offer aid in secret. As her pains grew stronger, a figure robed in green appeared, bathed her forehead with cool water, and whispered, "Let the child come on a wave, not a wind." The birth was swift, and the spirit vanished with the rising sun. To this day, some Bedouin women whisper to the wind during childbirth, asking it to remain still, lest it carry their child's soul too far from its body. Let the wind settle now in your thoughts, the incense curl like smoke around you, and the sacred silence of a desert birth wrap you in peace. In the valleys of Provence, an odd legend was told of the milk snake, a gentle serpent that came only to nursing mothers. It was said to slither beneath the cradle at night, not in menace, but in protection. If a child would not sleep, or a mother's milk was slow to come, villagers would say, "The snake has not yet sung." In the tale, the milk snake would rise from its coil and whisper in the baby's ear, not in words, but in vibrations soothing the soul. Then it would curl around the cradle's leg and sleep until dawn. To attract the snake, mothers left bowls of warm goat's milk with thyme beside the crib. Though no one ever saw it, the babies it visited grew calm and wise, and the mothers felt strangely strong in its absence. So now feel the hum of earth beneath you, a protective presence coiled in the shadows, and the lullaby of the milk snake, soft and low, in the corners of your mind. Let's continue this gentle global journey through the sacred, the strange, and the soothing stories of childbirth from the medieval world. Let your breath deepen. Let your thoughts drift like lanterns on a slow river. As we pass through misty mountains, sun-drenched temples, and frost-bitten fjords, each tale will wrap around you like a warm shawl. In the hills of medieval China, it was told that some children were conceived not through ordinary means, but through the blessing of the moon. A woman named Li Mei, barren for 10 years, dreamt one night that the moon descended from the sky and placed a jade egg in her hands. When she awoke, she found herself with child. This tale birthed the folk belief in the moon children, babies born to women after divine dreams or visions. They were believed to be exceptionally wise, sleepers who rarely cried, destined for peaceful, contemplative lives. In honor of this legend, Chinese mothers sometimes slept with a polished jade stone under their pillow during pregnancy, believing it would calm their dreams, ease their labor, attract benevolent spirits. They also wore silk sashes embroidered with cranes and lotuses, symbols of fertility and long life. Let your mind glide now over rice paddies under moonlight, and the silent descent of a silver orb bearing the quiet gift of life. In medieval India, particularly in the south, the great banyan tree was seen as sacred, a living embodiment of the divine feminine. Women seeking children would walk barefoot to its base, circle it 7 times, and whisper their hopes into its gnarled trunk. A tale is told of a childless queen who made such a journey in secret. That night, in her chambers, a white lotus bloomed from her water bowl, a sign her prayer had been answered. She bore twin sons 9 months later. Because of this tale, women in labor were often placed near fig or banyan branches tied above the birthing bed, bowls of water with floating flowers meant to encourage the spirit of the child to enter calmly. The midwife might chant in Sanskrit, her voice soft as the wind. As the tree bears fruit, so shall the womb bear joy. Breathe in now the scent of sandalwood and mango blossoms, and let the banyan's vast roots wrap gently around your spirit, steadying you in the dark. In medieval India, particularly in the south, the great banyan tree was seen as sacred, a living embodiment of the divine feminine. Women seeking children would walk barefoot to its base, circle it 7 times, and whisper their hopes into its gnarled trunk. A tale is told of a childless queen who made such a journey in secret. That night, in her chambers, a white lotus bloomed from her water bowl, a sign her prayer had been answered. She bore twin sons 9 months later. Because of this tale, women in labor were often placed near fig or banyan branches tied above the birthing bed, bowls of water with floating flowers meant to encourage the spirit of the child to enter calmly. The midwife might chant in Sanskrit, her voice soft as the wind. As the tree bears fruit, so shall the womb bear joy. Breathe in now the scent of sandalwood and mango blossoms, and let the banyan's vast roots wrap gently around your spirit, steadying you in the dark. Among the Inuit of the far north, it was believed that unborn children floated above the earth until the sound of a drum called them down into a waiting womb. A pregnant woman might sit near the sea, and if the wind was right, she could hear the faint pulse of that sky drum, a thump like a heartbeat, distant but calling. Some shamans performed birth drum ceremonies where the drum skin was painted with images of whales and children. Rhythmic beats were meant to help the soul of the baby descend smoothly. The mother would hum along, her voice anchoring the spirit to her body. If labor was long, the midwife would tap gently on the floor, mimicking the rhythm, not to hasten the birth, but to invite the baby toward the sound of the world. Now, let your thoughts align with that rhythm, the ancient drum in the sky, the heartbeat of mountains and sea, calling you deeper into warmth and safety. In the highlands of medieval Ethiopia, women often gave birth squatting over trenches filled with hot coals and ash covered in herbs. The heat soothed muscles and was thought to ward off the evil eye, but also to summon the blessing of the ash spirit, known in some villages as Sheila Mara. Sheila Mara was a spirit who loved clean birthplaces. Women would burn eucalyptus, rue, and coffee husks, sweep the room daily while singing soft lullabies, even before the baby arrived. Offer a small clay bowl of milk on the floor, left untouched for 3 days. One tale tells of a woman who neglected the ritual. Her child was born healthy but cried endlessly. An old midwife advised her to return to the ash pit and whisper, "Forgive me, warm watcher of my hearth." That night, the child slept without a sound. Feel that warmth now, the steam rising, the scent of sacred herbs, and the forgiving silence of a spirit soothed. In the open steppes of Mongolia, mothers believed in the wind cradle, a mystical sling that carried the soul of the unborn child to its waiting mother. When a woman conceived, her mother would tie a strip of felt between 2 wooden stakes outside the home to catch the wind and guide the spirit. If the strip fluttered wildly, they said twins were coming. At birth, the child was wrapped not just in cloth, but in wind-warmed wool, hung for a day beneath the open sky to absorb the strength of the sun and wind. Songs were sung that began with, "From the sky to the plain you rode, from the wind to my arms you came. Breathe in the cool sky, feel the wind against your skin, and drift in the invisible cradle that carries you between worlds." In the heartlands of medieval Ghana, among the Ashanti, childbirth was a deeply spiritual act. It was believed that every soul waited in the wawa tree, a sacred tree whose roots touched the world of the ancestors. Midwives would carry a small wooden bowl carved with images of fish and birds. This was the singing bowl, used to summon the child's soul at the onset of labor. The bowl was filled with water, then gently stirred with a carved stick. The movement of water was said to echo the rhythms of the ancestral river, which would call the soul downward into the waiting body. The midwife would hum, slowly and sweetly, a lullaby passed down through generations. In one story, a mother whose labor had stalled was taken to the base of a great tree. There, the midwife dipped her hands into the singing bowl and whispered, "Come, child of water and song, we are ready." Moments later, the woman cried out, not in pain, but in relief, as the child arrived, eyes wide and still. Now feel the warmth of that river, the vibration of song against wood, and the gentle current that guides you softly home. The coconut cradle, The Pacific Islands, in the Polynesian Islands, where the sea kissed every shoreline with song, children were said to be carried on waves before they were born. In some tales, they floated within coconut shells, drifting from the realm of the spirits to the womb. When labor began, women would be fanned with palm leaves soaked in seawater, believed to calm both body and soul. A coconut shell, carved with the shape of a wave, was placed under the bed to catch the first cry, sealing the spirit within the world of the living. Midwives often told tales of babies who took longer to arrive because they were riding a gentle tide. One lullaby went, "Ride your wave, little one, from foam to flesh, from sky to sun." After birth, the umbilical cord was buried beneath a young coconut tree, so the child would always feel rooted, even if the sea called them far from home. Let the tide carry you now, gently, slowly, beneath palm shade and salt air, and the murmur of lullabies rising like waves. In the dense forests of medieval Amazonia, among the Tupi and Guarani peoples, birth was a guarded, sacred time. Women gave birth in hammocks strung between trees, swaying with the rhythm of the earth. It was believed that a jaguar spirit, protector of mothers, waited nearby, not to pounce, but to watch. Fathers would mark a circle in the dirt around the hammock, using ashes from sacred wood. No loud words were spoken, only birdsong and wind were permitted to enter the birthing space. After birth, the baby's first nap would be taken while listening to the call of night frogs, believed to calm the soul and invite good dreams. A story tells of a woman who labored alone in the forest. When her strength failed, she heard a low purr nearby. A jaguar stepped into view, sat quietly, and stared into her eyes. She did not scream. She breathed. And when her child slipped into the world, the jaguar vanished into the leaves, leaving a single paw print in the dirt. From then on, that child was said to dream only of wild places and never feared the dark. Now close your eyes and feel the rustle of leaves, the sway of a cradle in a forest, and the silent gaze of a guardian spirit just beyond the trees. In the Celtic lands, where the hills rolled like lullabies and mist clung to stone, children were said to be kissed by the fae before they were born. A kiss on the spirit, not the body, bestowing a gift or a quirk or a fate. Midwives would keep a silver spoon passed down through generations and place it under the mother's pillow during labor to attract good spirits and confuse the mischievous ones. Some mothers whispered to Brigid, the goddess of hearth and fertility, whose flame was kept alive by priestesses and later by nuns. They said that when Brigid's flame flickered in a birth room, the pain would lessen and the soul would anchor without fear. There's a tale of a birth that went wrong. Storms raged outside, and the midwife arrived too late. But when the mother cried out for Brigid, the fire leapt in the hearth, and the baby turned in the womb. Born safely, the child's hair bore a streak of gold from the firelight, and they grew to be a healer. After births, mothers would sing soft, keening tunes, not sad, but hauntingly tender. Their melodies wandered like smoke through the moors. Let the sound of that distant song linger in your ears, a silver note, a flickering flame, and a hilltop kissed by fog and fate. Among some plains tribes, it was said that unborn children could hear the bones of their ancestors whispering. When a woman knew she was pregnant, her family would place bundles of bones from deer, birds, or even sacred buffalo near her sleeping place. At night, the bones would creak and settle with the house, and the baby would learn the voices of its lineage. Midwives used smoke from sage and sweetgrass to mark the threshold where spirits gathered. Songs were sung not just in the human voice, but by rattles and flutes, allowing the baby to feel the world as vibration first. One tale tells of a birth during a thunderstorm. As the wind howled, the bones began to rattle on their own. The baby came quickly, calm, with open eyes, as if he already knew the storm's name. It's said that child later became a storyteller, one who could speak to both the living and the dead. Now, imagine those whispers. Not frightening, but warm. Not loud, but close. Like breath against your cheek as you drift asleep. These are stories not just of childbirth, but of spirit, earth, and mystery, meant to cradle your thoughts as you drift further into rest. Nestle deeper beneath your blankets now, and let the warm hush of these old tales soothe your heart. On the gentle shores of what we now know as Polynesia, particularly among the Maori and Marquesan peoples, childbirth was considered a calling from the ocean. The soul of the child was believed to dwell in the sea, sleeping in a sacred shell or pearl until it was beckoned ashore by a mother's song. Mothers would wade into the sea in their final months, humming low melodies. The songs were meant not only to calm the unborn child, but to invite the spirit home. After birth, a tiny pearl or smooth shell was placed beside the newborn, a symbol of where they had come from. The afterbirth was buried near the sea, under stones wrapped in pandanus leaves, returning part of the soul to its source. One story tells of a baby who would not open her eyes for 7 days. On the 7th day, the mother returned to the beach and sang her melody into a conch shell. The waves responded with foam and wind, and when she returned, the baby looked up and smiled. So close your eyes now, and listen to the soft crash of waves, the lullaby of the tide, and the pearl waiting quietly in the deep. High in the cold reaches of the medieval Swiss Alps, villagers believed in the Bell Mother, a spirit who carried a golden bell that only mothers could hear. It was said she wandered from peak to peak, tolling her bell to soothe mothers in labor and chase away mountain spirits who might twist the fate of a birth. To summon her, families hung a brass cowbell over the doorway, tied with red thread and thyme sprigs. During labor, the midwife would tap gently on the bell's side, a rhythm said to match the beating heart of a child in the womb. The mother would listen between contractions for the soft echo of a second bell deep in the mountains, answering back. One tale tells of a winter birth during a fierce storm. As the wind howled and candles flickered, the family feared the child would not survive. But then a clear melodic tink rang from outside. The bell mother had arrived. The baby was born strong, crying into the snowlight. Now rest in the sound of quiet chimes, and let the mountain winds grow still as you drift deeper into calm. Among the ancient kingdoms along the Niger River, from Mali to Songhai, there were whispered tales of Awa Dede, the river woman who walked unseen beside pregnant mothers. She was neither goddess nor ghost, but a keeper of the life thread. It was said that each child was tied to the world by a thread of gold, and Awa Dede held the spool. If labor was difficult, a calabash bowl filled with river water and herbs was placed beside the birthing mat. The midwife would hum a soft rhythm, tapping the bowl's edge to summon Awa Dede's attention. Customs included binding the mother's wrists loosely in silk cords, symbolizing the soul's tether, painting the mother's belly with white clay spirals, calling the child inward. One story tells of a child who would not breathe. The midwife placed the baby's feet in warm water, sang to the river, and whispered, "Awa Dede, finish the knot." The baby gasped, and life rushed in. Let your soul now float gently on warm river water, the hum of a calabash bowl beside you, and the golden thread tying you softly to the world. In the high mountains of medieval Peru, within the stone villages of the Andes, people believed that every birth carried the flame of Inti, the sun spirit. When a woman went into labor, her family kindled a sacred fire, not large but enduring, meant to stay alight until the first cry of the child. Embers were placed beneath the birthing bench to encourage warmth and strength. Charcoal symbols were drawn on the floor: suns, llamas, and maize. The placenta was buried with small sun-shaped stones, offering thanks to Inti for a successful delivery. In a well-loved tale, a baby was born on a moonless night. The fire kept going out, and the mother was cold. But then an old woman knocked at the door and handed over a coal wrapped in gold leaf. She said, "This belongs to the child. Keep it safe." That coal was kept for years, and that child grew to be a healer who tended fires in the temple of the sun. Now close your eyes to the glow of sacred embers and feel the warmth beneath your feet, carrying you towards sleep like a cradle of light. In the lush forests of medieval Cambodia and Laos, it was believed that newborns came from the stars, and fireflies were the wandering lights of unborn souls. When a woman went into labor, windows were left open to let the fireflies guide the soul in. They believed if many fireflies came, the child would be joyful and clever. If just one hovered and stayed, the child would have an old soul. After birth, the baby was shown to the fireflies in the dark, a quiet offering. If the lights danced near, it was a sign of blessing. A lullaby from the era survives. Light of the leaf, come find my child. Wing of the breeze, stay and smile. And so the mother would sing as the fireflies floated like lanterns in the night. Feel the flutter of light now, soft wings in the warm forest air, and let their glow dance through your dreams. Let's continue this dreamy descent into ancient times, where story and soul wove together in hushed corners of the world. These tales, spun in the flicker of firelight and murmured under stars, were meant to calm mothers, cradle children, and guide hearts through the sacred threshold of birth. Now, let your breath slow, as though it's following the rhythm of a lullaby lost in time. We'll keep drifting, from frozen isles to sun-warmed deserts, finding the softest stories to carry you into rest. In medieval Ireland and Scotland, some midwives whispered of Cailleach Beara, the bone woman, an ancient crone who shaped each child's skeleton from driftwood and stone. It was said that before labor began, the Cailleach would sit unseen at the mother's hearth, warming the bones she had gathered. If she was pleased with the home, tidy, calm, full of love, she would craft a strong child with supple joints and clear eyes. In honor of her, birch twigs were tied in bundles and placed at the hearth to welcome her spirit. A bowl of oatmeal and honey was left on the sill, with a small bone carved with spirals. The room was swept thrice before the first contraction, to show reverence for her arrival. One tale speaks of a woman who labored through a storm. The midwife swore she saw a figure in blue standing by the door. After the birth, they found a spiral-carved pebble beneath the baby's blanket. Feel now the hush of peat smoke. the tap of bone against stone, and the watchful gaze of the crone who moulds us from the earth. Far in the snowy lands of Scandinavia, the Sami people told of Nastigalu, the Star Mother, who would send down her children wrapped in feathers. Mothers wore cloaks lined with ptarmigan down and kept feather bundles under their pillows. During labor, soft chants called the Star Mother to open the sky and lower her infant gift. Feathers fall, stars descend, lay your child in my arms again. Customs included laying out a fur-lined nest beside the hearth for the baby, never a hard cradle. Avoiding loud noises during the last month of pregnancy, so the feathers wouldn't scatter. Tying feathers into the mother's braid, said to soften her pain and guide the child safely. One winter, a child was born during an aurora. The grandmother said she saw the Star Mother dancing across the sky. The baby, wrapped in down, slept for days, silent and glowing. Let yourself drift now into a nest of light feathers, stars above you, snow beneath, and the sky opening quietly. In the sands of medieval Persia, poets and physicians alike believed that the unborn child was written into the world like a poem. It was said that every womb was a book, and the child's name was written on its first page by Kalam-i-Koda, the pen of God. Pregnant women kept a verse of poetry pinned inside their clothing. Saffron ink nearby, believed to bring beauty and eloquence. A single pomegranate to symbolize fertility and language. Labor was often accompanied by whispered verses, not screamed or shouted, but sung in soft rhythm so the child would arrive into a world of beauty, not pain. One tale tells of a mother who recited Rumi's poetry through each contraction, and when the baby emerged, the midwife claimed to see golden letters glimmer across its skin, then vanish. Listen now to the soft scratch of a pen in the quiet, to the poem of your breath, and to a womb that is both cradle and storybook. In medieval Japan, the goddess Kannon was revered as a protector of women in childbirth. She was said to ride on lotus petals and appear in dreams to comfort the laboring. Shrines to Kannon dotted the landscape, and women on the cusp of delivery would drink tea made from cherry blossoms or camellia petals for calm and beauty, place a lotus-shaped charm under their pillow, burn incense and whisper, "Kannon-sama, hold me steady." It was believed that Kannon could catch the spirit of a child if it hesitated at the threshold and gently guide it into the world. A beloved story tells of a mother in terrible pain who, upon closing her eyes, saw Kannon holding out her hand. The pain dissolved, and the baby was born wrapped in a blanket patterned like petals. The blanket still rests at the temple of Kiyomizu-dera, a tribute to the mercy of the goddess. Now imagine yourself lying in a bed of soft blossoms, petals swirling gently in the air, and Kannon's steady hand guiding you through clouds of light. Among Aboriginal tribes in Australia, it was believed that unborn souls rested in dreamtime, a spiritual realm watched over by animals and ancestors. When a child was ready to enter the world, it was the spirit of the spider who wove its soul into a body. Webs were sacred. Pregnant women wore woven net charms, and some elders spun silk thread around stones to offer to the birthing ground. If a spider wove a web over the birthing site, it was considered a sign of great protection. During labor, elders would hum low tunes that mimic the wind moving through webs. A circle of ash and bark was created, representing the dreaming pathway. If the baby struggled to arrive, a small feather or thread was placed on the mother's chest to encourage the soul's descent. One elder told of a birth where a black and gold spider sat above the mother the entire night, and when the child was born, the web shimmered in sunrise light, a promise that the ancestors had watched and woven. Let your thoughts now float in a gossamer net, suspended in air, shimmering, light, held safely in the weave of time. Let us now slip quietly into chambers of velvet and shadow, into castles lit by candlelight and palaces wrapped in silence. Here, behind heavy curtains and guarded doors, royal births unfolded like ceremonies of stars, surrounded by myth, mystery, and immense pressure. But even queens labored like all women, with breath, with pain, with hope. Now, breathe softly, and listen for the whisper of silk skirts, the hush of royal midwives, and the lullabies once sung in golden cradles. In the 12th century, Queen Helena of Hungary was said to have birthed her child in total secrecy beneath the full moon, under the guidance of a midwife who claimed to hear stars speak. Royal astrologers predicted danger for any child born in daylight that year, so a sacred chamber was prepared underground, draped with silver cloth and lit only by moonlight reflected through a crystal bowl of water. During labor, a mirror was placed beside her belly to reflect the moonlight, believed to protect both mother and heir from spirits. The queen clutched a rosary carved from moonstone and lavender wood. Outside, guards stood silently, listening for the soft cry that would signal the continuation of the royal line. Legend tells that when the baby was born, a prince with pale eyes and a quiet heart, the moon outside glowed brighter, and a wolf howled in the hills, signaling approval from the wild. So let the silver glow of the moon wash over your thoughts now, and imagine the silence of velvet halls and the first breath of a sleeping king. Eleanor of Aquitaine, Queen of both France and England, was surrounded by danger and intrigue. When pregnant with her 5th daughter during the chaos of 12th century conflict, she was rumored to have gone deep into the forest, away from court, for a secret birth. It was believed that political forces threatened the child's safety. So Eleanor, cloaked in green and gold, journeyed to an abbey hidden among oak trees. There, surrounded only by nuns and herbalists, she gave birth beneath an old stained glass window depicting Saint Anne, the protector of mothers. The baby was wrapped in linen soaked in rosewater and myrrh. A wax seal was pressed onto the newborn's foot, a symbol of royal lineage in case the child needed to be hidden. The nuns sang Ave Maria softly through the night, holding back tears of joy. The child was later revealed to be a great patron of learning and poetry, though her name was changed thrice to conceal her from danger. Now picture the soft rustle of leaves, the scent of rosewater, and a mother's quiet sigh beneath the abbey dome. All is safe. All is calm. Queen Isabella of Castile, mother of the future Queen Joanna and grandmother to Charles V, was said to have insisted on a cradle ceremony, a royal tradition dating back centuries. Before her birth, the cradle was carved by artisans for 40 nights from a single olive tree and painted in gold leaf prayers by monks. A silver key was hung on the cradle's side to unlock wisdom in the newborn's heart. In the 4 corners were tiny bells meant to chase away nightmares and spirits. When Isabella gave birth to her daughter Joanna, it is said that every bell rang at once, though no one had touched them. The midwives took it as a sign that the girl would rise high, perhaps too high, some whispered, for her mind to bear. Indeed, Joanna would become known as La Loca, the Mad Queen, yet her birth was watched by saints and stars alike. Let your thoughts now swing in a golden cradle, with bells chiming softly, and the weight of destiny laid gently to rest. In 1285, Queen Margaret of Scotland was said to have birthed her only daughter in a room lined entirely with silver mirrors. Her astrologer had warned that the child would be haunted by echoes from the past unless surrounded by reflection. Thus, labour took place in a mirrored chamber where every candle flame burned a dozen times, and the queen could see herself from every angle. The child was born in perfect silence, her first cry delayed for several minutes. It is said that the queen reached for her child, and a second pair of arms appeared in the mirror, though no one else was near. From that day on, the girl grew up fascinated by mirrors, and later founded a monastery where every novice meditated before a polished shield of bronze to see their true face before taking vows. Now, close your eyes and imagine light glinting off mirrored walls and a mother smiling into infinite reflections. In Kievan Rus, during the 11th century, a queen known only in legend as Vasilisa the Flameborn was said to have given birth during a siege, as flames consumed the outer walls of the city. She refused to be moved from the fortress chapel, saying, "If my child is to rule flame, she must be born in fire." As arrows fell outside and smoke curled at the stained glass windows, the queen laboured. She held a burning candle to her heart, never letting the flame flicker. A fire priest stood behind her, chanting protection rites in Old Slavonic. The child was born with hair the colour of flame and eyes that never blinked at torchlight. Vasilisa's line ruled for 3 generations, said to be immune to heat and destruction. Now, feel the warmth in your chest, the safe flame that never dies, and let it lull you into the deepest peace. In the velvet-draped halls of medieval Europe, where queens and noble ladies bore the weight of dynasties with every breath, every pain, every hope, the fate of empires often rested in the arms of midwives, and the cries of newborns echoed louder than the clash of swords. Now breathe softly. Let the cold stone corridors warm beneath candlelight. Let the tapestries whisper forgotten tales, and let us slip deeper into the royal birthing chambers of medieval Europe. Blanche of Castile, Queen of France, and mother to the future Saint Louis IX, was said to have been gifted with a miraculous candle by a mystic from Toledo. The woman told her, "This flame will stay lit through your labor if your child is destined for sainthood." When the queen went into labor in the high summer of 1214, the court held its breath. Midwives surrounded her with holy relics, and the candle, tall, slender, wrapped in silk, was placed at her bedside. Each contraction was met with a soft chime of bells tied to the bedposts. Psalms were sung to calm her heartbeat and keep the candle steady. As the child was born, the flame danced, but never flickered, despite a strong wind that rushed through the open window. Later, when King Louis IX would lead crusades and be canonized, it was said that the candle's flame had foretold not just a child, but a saint. Now, imagine the warm golden light of that sacred flame flickering behind your closed eyes. Steady, soothing, sure. Queen Philippa of Hainault, wife of Edward III of England, was famed for her gentle heart and political wisdom. When expecting her 9th child in 1355, she reportedly chose to give birth beneath the nave of a cathedral, believing the sacred stones would bring her strength. The labor was difficult, long and wearying, but she asked to remain where she could hear the monks chanting echo through the vaulted ceilings. Beneath a great stained-glass window of the Virgin Mary, a birthing chair was placed, draped in royal blue velvet. Water from the cathedral's holy font was used to anoint her temples during pain. The baby was born as the sun passed across the stained glass, casting a prism of light over mother and child. It is said that the boy, Prince Edmund, was born with unusually calm eyes and never cried, not even at birth. The monks declared it a divine sign. Now, feel the cold stone of cathedral walls warm around you, the chant of monks rising like breath, and the hush of holy light through coloured glass. Queen Anne of Bohemia, consort of King Richard II of England, was known for her quiet, poetic soul. Though many of her pregnancies ended in tragedy, one story, half legend, half lullaby, tells of a swan that came to her in a dream before her final pregnancy. The swan told her she would birth a child of beauty and sorrow and left a single white feather on her pillow. When Anne conceived again, she ordered a cradle shaped like a swan, carved from birchwood and lined with downy feathers. Every day she wrote poetry to her unborn child, rolled into scrolls and tucked beneath the cradle. She wore a brooch shaped like a feather and forbade hunting swans across her lands during her pregnancy. Though the baby was born still, it was said the swan returned the night after, resting beside the cradle for hours before vanishing into the mist. The cradle was kept in Westminster for a century, and no dust ever gathered upon it. A miracle, some whispered, of a sorrowful but sacred bond. Now float gently, like a swan gliding across a still lake. Feather light, memory soft, into the gentle hush of dreams. In 1302, a Duchess of Flanders named Margarita of Dampierre gave birth under strange circumstances. Her husband, fearing political enemies would curse the child during labor, ordered that no one was to speak aloud during the birth, not even the midwives. Thus, in a chamber lined with wool tapestries to mute sound, a wordless birth took place. Instructions were given by gesture. The only sounds were soft humming and the rustle of linen. A bowl of melted beeswax burned beside the bed to purify the air and capture any wandering spirits in its golden glow. It was said the baby, a girl named Clara, didn't cry at birth, but simply opened her eyes and blinked, then fell asleep. From then on, midwives in Bruges trained in the silent tradition, learning to communicate through taps and signals for fear that noise might invite misfortune. Let your mind now quiet itself, as if words have fallen away. Only the hush of breath, the soft tap of fabric, and the golden warmth of beeswax remain. Joanna I of Naples, ruler in her own right, was surrounded by scandal and legend. But in her youth, she was beloved for her mystical beliefs and connection to dreams. It was said that before her only surviving child's birth, she dreamt of the Virgin Mary cradling a serpent and a voice that whispered, "Let him be born under water, for fire shall follow." Taking the dream as omen, she insisted her labor take place in a bathhouse filled with rosewater and oils, surrounded by mosaics of ocean waves. The child was born in water, gently lifted by midwives like a pearl from a shell. Immediately after, thunder cracked over the palace and a fire broke out in the kitchens. The baby, untouched by smoke or heat, was named Charles, a nod to the strength of those born through water, tempered by fire. Joanna kept the mosaic tiles from that bath for the rest of her life, turning them into a prayer bench. Now let yourself drift, floating in warm waters, calm as marble pools, and safe within the folds of myth and memory. These are no longer mere tales. They are tapestries of time, embroidered with the fears, hopes, rituals, and whispers that accompanied the most profound moment in a royal woman's life: childbirth. Nestle now into the folds of velvet and fur. Let the candlelight flicker across carved stone. Hear the soft rustle of linen, the distant toll of bells. We shall wander through these royal births not as scholars, but as quiet witnesses, unseen, unjudging, drifting dreamlike through the centuries. Let the world fall quiet now, and allow me to guide you deeper into the twilight-lit rooms where queens once cried out, and legends were born from blood and breath. In the winter of 1355, Queen Margaret of Denmark, who would one day unite the Nordic kingdoms under her rule, was but a young royal wife, cloistered in the frost-laced halls of Søborg Castle, heavy with her first child. The north was locked in ice that year. Even the sea had frozen close to the shore, and wolves had been sighted beneath the windows of the chapel. Local seers had predicted a harsh omen. When a queen gives birth beneath snow that does not melt, the child will rule over lands divided by cold and fire. The palace grew tense. Every candle flickered nervously. Midwives whispered of premature labors and frost-bitten babes. But Margaret remained quiet, praying daily in the chapel, while gripping a carved ivory icon of Saint Bridget, the protector of expectant mothers. As her labor began, snow began to fall, not flurries, but a blizzard. The castle became encased in whiteness, like a fortress made of bone. The firewood had nearly run out. The midwives wrapped the queen in cloaks and bear pelts as they prepared the birthing chamber. And then a ring of candles was lit around the bed, 24 of them, one for each saint day passed since her last moon cycle. Birch bark was burned with sage to cleanse the air, a Scandinavian custom meant to drive out trolls and spirits who might seek to steal the soul of a newborn during labor. The queen labored for 2 days and 2 nights, refusing laudanum or poppy. She kept her eyes open, murmuring a chant passed down by her grandmother, a line of protection older than Christendom. At last, a boy was born, quiet, dusky-skinned, with tufts of dark hair. His first cry came not as a wail, but a single, sharp gasp, like someone waking from a vision. The snow outside stopped, and just as the midwives wrapped the baby in ermine, the ice on the inner windows began to melt, though the fire had not been rekindled. The child, Olaf, would rule briefly, but it was Margaret herself, his mother, who rose to power. A queen who united Denmark, Norway, and Sweden under a single crown, and who was never questioned again, for they said, she gave birth while winter bowed to her. Now imagine, if you will, the hush of falling snow outside a high tower, the soft rustling of fur cloaks, and a candle-lit queen, steady-eyed, breaking winter's spell with a single breath. Isabella, daughter of King Philip IV of France and later Queen of England by marriage to Edward II, was known for her beauty, cunning, and strange devotion to ancient rites. She had been raised among seers and sibyls. At court, her mother kept a collection of texts said to be written by the Vestal Virgins of Rome, and Isabella was taught not only letters, but symbols, the moon's phases, the virtues of silver, the language of herbs. When Isabella became pregnant in 1312, she secluded herself not in royal chambers, but in a sealed birthing temple constructed from stone, silk, and shadow, a structure built in the gardens of the French court, following the blueprint of an ancient Gaulish birthing hut. The chamber had walls painted in rich indigo and crimson, covered in vines of embroidered ivy and foxglove, plants associated with fertility and warding, a skylight through which moonlight could touch only the center of the birthing chair, a silent priestess, mute by vow, who stood vigil throughout the labor with a silver bell that was never rung. Isabella gave birth at twilight on the eve of St. Genevieve's feast day. The child, a boy named Edward, the future Edward III, was said to have been born with his eyes open and unblinking. As he emerged, the mute priestess stepped forward and whispered the only word she would ever speak: "Lion." No one ever saw her again. Isabella insisted her son be wrapped not in silk, but in linen infused with mugwort, salt, and strands of her own hair, to bind them together in spirit. In later years, when Edward III took the throne and shattered the power of France's hold on English succession, many whispered that he had been born not merely of a queen, but of something older and deeper. Now imagine, if you can, the deep indigo walls, the cold moonbeam touching ancient stone, and a newborn prince watching shadows pass, already wise. Yolande of Aragon was a formidable woman. In the early 15th century, she was known as the Queen of Four Kingdoms and a staunch supporter of Joan of Arc. But few knew the tale of her daughter's birth, a night still spoken of in hushed voices in Provence. Yolande's pregnancy had been prophesied by a Carmelite monk who foretold that her child would either bring peace or death to a generation. To break the curse, the child had to be born beneath the toll of an iron bell, cast in silence and never rung until the hour of labor. So the queen ordered the bell forged by blacksmiths who worked blindfolded and mute. 9 months later, during a thunderstorm that shook the foundations of her fortress at Tarascon, Yolande went into labor. The bell was hoisted to a special room with no windows, and a birthing platform was built beneath it. As contractions began, midwives burned rosemary, cloves, and powdered iron filings, believing the metal would bleed out the curse. When the baby crowned, the bell was struck once, releasing a deep, soul-vibrating tone that echoed across the valley. The sound was so powerful, villagers claimed birds fell from the sky. The child, Marie of Anjou, grew into a queen herself and married Charles VII of France, the very king whom Joan of Arc would crown at Reims. Yolande kept the bell and had it buried with her, deep beneath a monastery in Saumur. To this day, monks say that on the anniversary of her death, the ground hums like distant thunder. Now, close your eyes. Feel the resonance of that ancient bell in your chest, a deep, steady hum, and rest, knowing that even curses can be soothed by a mother's will. Now descent through candlelit corridors of time, where stone walls witness sacred pain, and the breath of royal mothers shape the legacy of nations. Let your mind become a quiet chamber of velvet and lace. Listen to the wind slip past the towers, and drift with me now into the heart of Burgundy, where the wine runs deep and the legends deeper still. In the spring of 1310, Margaret of Burgundy, wife to Louis VI of France, was expecting her first child at the Grand Palace of Château de Vincennes. But before her final confinement, she insisted on returning to her home region of Burgundy, to a hidden manor nestled among the famous vineyards of Beaune. There, among sloping hills and trellised vines, she prepared a birth rooted in earth and spirit, far from the noise and scheming of the French court. The manor was ancient, with cellars beneath it older than the dukedom itself. It was said that the vines had once been blessed by St. Martin, and that wine drawn during labour would protect both mother and child. As Margaret's labour began, the chamber was lined with linen soaked in lavender and hung with grapevines twisted into garlands. A basin of warm red wine was placed beneath the bed to draw away pain, a folk belief that what goes below the womb steals its sorrow. Midwives whispered old Burgundian blessings, half prayers, half poems, asking the Earth Mother to loosen her hold gently. The labour was long, stretching through the night into dawn. The vines outside shook with rain, and inside the sound of dripping wine into a chalice marked each contraction. The child, a girl, was born with cheeks already ruddy, as if kissed by the vines themselves. Margaret named her Beatrix, after an ancestor who once rode with Eleanor of Aquitaine. Sadly, court politics would silence the child's name from history, but in Burgundy it is still said that the wine-born girl brings luck to harvests when her name is whispered into the soil. Now imagine the hush of rainfall over vineyard leaves, the soft gurgle of wine poured slowly into a silver cup, and a mother's breath easing into sleep as dawn filters through vine-draped windows. In the far northern reaches of Norway, near the icy shores of Trondheim Fjord, the Princess Astrid was born during a winter so bitter it froze the sea for 3 days solid. Her mother, Queen Ragnar of Norway, was known to commune with Sami healers and took her final months of pregnancy in a lodge surrounded by snow-packed pine beneath a sky of green auroras. The queen was told by a wise woman that the child would be blessed if born beneath a full moon in a circle of antler tallow candles, and so a sacred circle was prepared. 12 candles, each carved from reindeer tallow and etched with runes, were lit in a snow-carved chamber. Queen Ragnar wore a cloak made of silver fox fur and labradorite beads that shimmered like the northern lights. Birch bark was burned with crushed juniper berries, and a lullaby was sung in an ancient Sami tongue, a song meant to lure friendly spirits toward the newborn's breath. When the child arrived, the northern lights pulsed brighter across the sky, and a polar wind died down into a sudden stillness. Astrid was wrapped not in cloth, but in snow-soft moss lined with seal fur. The Sami midwife declared, "She is kin to the moon bear. She walks between shadow and silver." Astrid would grow to become a powerful queen, known for guiding Norway through famine and war with a calm wisdom and a gaze that many said could still storms. Now picture the flicker of runic candles in a room made of snow. Hear the wind hush, and let your breath slow with the rhythm of ice melt and lullabies forgotten by time. The hidden birth of Kunigunde of Swabia. Cradled in a cloister's silence, Kunigunde of Swabia, Empress Consort of the Holy Roman Empire and wife to Henry II, was revered not only for her piety, but for a strange tale surrounding the birth of her younger sister, a story Kunigunde preserved in her private psalter, illuminated with gold leaf and ink from crushed violets. Their mother, Duchess Agnes of Swabia, gave birth in the year 976, at a time when war rippled across the empire. To protect her unborn child from political enemies, she was sent into cloistered seclusion at the Abbey of Niedermünster, a sacred refuge nestled in the Bavarian woods. There, the birth unfolded in a manner steeped in sacred silence. The abbess, a famed herbalist and mystic, prepared a birthing tincture made from angelica root, marigold petals, and spring water drawn under starlight. The chamber was lined with parchment inscribed with psalms, hundreds of them, covering the walls to form a sacred cocoon of scripture. As the labor began, nuns chanted softly, their voices echoing like wind through stone, never louder than a whisper, for fear that noise might startle the angels away. The child was born with a veil over her face, a caul believed to mark one destined for visions. The abbess removed it and burned it immediately, mixing the ashes with rose oil to anoint the newborn's feet. The girl was raised within the cloister for the first 3 years of her life, and later became known as the Lady of Whispers, said to see the future in dreams and speak with birds. Now feel the hush of a cloistered hall, the brush of parchment against stone, and the light of moon through stained glass, soft as the breath of angels. Let the stars above these ancient keeps twinkle ever fainter as we settle deeper into our tapestry of time. The torches are dim now, the corridors hushed. Only the sound of quiet stories remains, curling through the night like incense smoke, warm and soft. Let us return once more to the velvet shadows of royal chambers, where a single cry could herald the rise of a kingdom. High in the cool green mountains of Tyrol, in a secluded alpine castle surrounded by goat bells and glacier winds, Queen Elizabeth, wife to Count Meinhard II, prepared for the birth of her third child in the summer of 1275. The valley was heavy with wildflowers, but there was one thing that disturbed the peace. An eclipse was predicted to pass directly overhead on the day her labor was due. In Tyrolean folk belief, a child born during an eclipse might be half-shadowed, destined to see both truths and illusions. Midwives warned against it, but Elizabeth, raised on a blend of Latin psalms and forest whispers, welcomed the omen. She retreated into a birthing cottage used by local mountain women, a round wooden structure half sunk into the slope, warmed by heated stones and ringed by wool blankets embroidered with flowers. As the sun began to dim, Elizabeth's chamber was scattered with edelweiss, said to bring courage in the face of fear. Herbal oils of thyme and pine were rubbed on her hands and feet, a grounding ritual to tether the soul during pain. A goat's horn was hung above the doorway to ward off wandering spirits during the brief darkness. When the eclipse reached its zenith, the room turned dusky, not black, but golden grey, like the last light of a dream. And in that moment, the child emerged, crying once, clear and bright, as the light began to return. The midwife whispered, "She is of both worlds, the seen and the veiled." Elizabeth named her daughter Agnes, and the girl grew to be a mystic poet, writing verses that would one day find their way into the royal court of Bohemia. Some say she dreamed of stars that spoke in riddles and forests where sunlight moved backward. Now breathe with me, in and out, like the slow covering and uncovering of the sun. Let the thought of warm pine wood and golden twilight carry you gently toward rest. In the coastal duchy of Brittany, where stone castles overlook stormy cliffs and sea foam, there lived a duchess named Isabeau, who bore her only child during a fog so thick it swallowed the chapel bell. This was in the year 1323. The castle of Morlex, where Isabeau resided, stood above crashing waves, and her people were fishermen, monks, and storytellers. Local legend said that when a woman gave birth during a sea fog, the soul of the ocean would bless the child, or claim it. So, as the fog rolled in, Isabeau lit 30 candles and placed a conch shell beneath her birthing bed, an offering to the sea. Her labor began not with pain, but with a series of dreams. Dreams of a silver-eyed woman walking the shore with a coral staff, humming lullabies in Breton. The chamber was wrapped in sailcloth, stitched with knots meant to bind luck to the womb. Fishermen's wives served as midwives that day, bringing with them charms made of pearl, rope, and bone. And then the child arrived. A girl, pale as milk, with a shock of silver hair and eyes the color of low tide. As she cried, the fog outside began to recede, as if exhaled from the sea itself. The waves below turned from grey to soft turquoise, and gulls circled the keep in a slow spiral. The girl was named Gwenaëlle, and she was believed to be half blessed by a sea spirit. When she later became Duchess, she was called the Moon Wave, known for calming feuds with only a glance and walking the beaches barefoot, speaking to the tide. Now picture the hush of fog against ancient stone, the scent of salt and thyme, the crackle of a fire barely heard over the lull of waves. Let that vision wrap around you like sea mist, quiet and cold and safe. In the heart of medieval Prague, under the rule of the Przemyslid dynasty, Queen Ludmila, wife to Prince Bodzivoy, gave birth to a daughter in the highest tower of the palace, beneath a painted ceiling of constellations. It was the year 875, and Ludmila had been gifted a strange vision during her pregnancy, that her child would speak with stars and walk among fate. She ordered her midwives to prepare a cradle carved from meteorite stone, inlaid with soft bark and lined with velvet made from the silk of Persian traders. The labor began just after dusk. The walls of the chamber were covered in star charts drawn in gold ink. An astrologer, silent and veiled, stood by the door, reading the sky through a slit in the roof. A perfumed candle made of beeswax and clove marked each hour, its scent soothing the queen's breath. When the child emerged, a comet appeared in the eastern sky. She did not cry, but cooed softly, almost as if humming. The child was named Milada, and though she never claimed a throne, her poetry and letters became beloved across the empire. Many claimed her verses could lull even angry kings into sleep. Now imagine yourself in that tall tower, your body wrapped in warmth, the scent of clove and silk in the air, and a sky full of stars wheeling slowly overhead, each one humming a quiet lullaby just for you. Let your breath grow slower, softer, as we cross one more threshold of time. The night deepens outside the castle walls. The tapestries are swaying with the hush of wind. Let us press on through these royal dreams, warm and glimmering with memory. We now visit the warm dust of Castile, the mossy valleys of Württemberg, and the mist-wrapped cliffs of the Orkney Isles, where stories bloom like heather after rain. Each tale a lullaby, each birth a spark in the long twilight of medieval night. In the sun-baked plains of Castile, where olive trees stretch like prayers to the sky and the air hums with cicadas, Queen Violante of Aragon, wife to King Alfonso X the Wise, gave birth in a palace draped in both mathematics and mysticism. Violante was known not only for her intellect, but for her devotion to Andalusian herbalists and Jewish astrologers. She believed that birth was a sacred alchemy, a moment when soul and body meet like flame and oil. When her labor began under a full moon of September, her chamber was prepared in intricate detail. Fresh rosemary was scattered over the floor in a spiral to guide the child's spirit safely into the world. Strings of bells were tied to the hem of her bed curtain, and a single dancer performed in silence, circling the room with slow, hypnotic steps to lull pain into stillness. From Cordoba, a learned midwife arrived bearing tinctures of orange blossom, cumin and myrrh, infused in honeyed water and poured drop by drop onto Violante's tongue during each contraction. And then, in the hush between two long breaths, the child arrived. A girl, her skin golden and flushed, her fingers curling as if reaching for music. The moment she cried, the dancer stopped mid-step and fell to her knees in joy. They named her Leonore. She would later wed Edward I of England, but in her homeland she was remembered as La Niña de los Pasos Suaves, the girl of soft steps, who once danced before she could walk. Let the thought of warm air and citrus blossoms carry you now. Feel the rhythm of slow footsteps, and let the hush of Spanish twilight cradle your thoughts like silk. Far to the northeast, in the shadowed valleys of the Black Forest, Duke Eberhard of Württemberg awaited the birth of his first son. His wife, Lady Hildegard, was descended from forest dwellers and insisted their child be born not in stone halls, but in a woodland cottage built atop a mossy hill near the river Enns. It was a quiet place, visited more often by deer than by nobles, and when Hildegard's labor began, the forest itself seemed to hush. The birth room was lit only by beeswax candles shaped like acorns and bark spirals. The mattress was made from woven fir needles and wild hay, soft and sweet-smelling beneath the linen. A raven's feather was tied to the window ledge to keep away the whispering ones, spirits said to lure babies into the woods with lullabies. As the child crowned, a wind rose outside, not cold, but urgent, like the breath of something old and watching. The trees creaked. A stag was seen standing just beyond the clearing, unmoving. And then, a cry. A boy was born, with a moss-colored birthmark across his chest, shaped like a tree. They named him Wilhelm, and it is said that when he later ruled as duke, he could calm storms with a word, and that birds followed him through the forest like a second cloak. Now picture the hush beneath pine boughs, the soft earth beneath your bare feet, and the feel of moss against skin, soothing, ancient, alive. In the wind-blasted Orkney Isles, under skies that never fully sleep, the daughter of Earl Harold and Lady Estrid came into the world wrapped in salt wind and old Norse prophecy. The Orkney folk believed that when a child was born during a moontide, her destiny would be tied to the sea and her soul guided by selkies, the seal folk who crossed between land and ocean. Lady Estrid gave birth in a stone roundhouse overlooking the cliffs as gulls wheeled and the sea beat like a giant heart against the rocks. A cradle of driftwood was prepared, painted with symbols of waves and gulls. Water gathered from 9 tide pools was sprinkled across the chamber to summon sea blessings. The midwife, an old Norse seeress, sang in low tones, songs said to call forth calm waters and easy births. The child arrived just before dawn, a girl with grey-blue eyes and hair like dark seaweed. She did not cry, but let out a single long breath, as though she'd been holding it since before memory. Named Sigrid, she became a famed voyager and chronicler, writing poems about stars reflected in black fjords and dreams of whales that wept silver tears. The people of Orkney say she still walks the shore when storms rise, searching for her Selkie kin. Let the rhythm of those waves rock you now, soft and slow, and feel the peace of a tide that always returns, always carries you home. Drift ever deeper, dear listener, as candlelight flickers low upon the stone, and the hush of ancient chambers folds over us like a woolen cloak. Let us cross the narrow bridges of time, tiptoe through marble corridors and shadowed antechambers, where the soft cries of newborns once mingled with whispered blessings and breathless awe. Tonight we continue, with longer, richer stories of medieval royalty, birthing not only heirs, but legends wrapped in swaddling cloth. In the late winter of 1285, in the royal gardens of Naples, Queen Mary of Hungary, wife of Charles II of Anjou, entered her birthing month beneath skies pierced with soft rains and blooming almond trees. Naples, with its lemon-coloured stone and soft sea breeze, was already a city where myth and memory blurred. But that year, a tale was born that would linger like the scent of orange blossom through the centuries. Mary, a woman of great piety and strength, had suffered 2 losses before this pregnancy. Her heart carried both hope and fear. The court astrologer warned her of unquiet stars on the horizon, and yet the queen chose not to retreat to the marble birthing chambers of Castelnuovo. Instead, she moved to a secluded garden villa near the Bay of Naples, where the air was cleaner and the olive groves hummed with doves. The story says that Mary insisted on birthing outdoors under a canopy woven from silk and myrtle branches. A circle of white-robed midwives stood watch, each bearing a different sacred charm, a painted palm, a crucifix carved from coral, and a flask of holy water from St. Clare's convent. The queen was wrapped in embroidered linens from Hungary, stitched by nuns with phrases from the Psalms in gold thread. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in. As the labour began, the almond trees, which had been silent all season, suddenly burst into bloom, unseasonably, impossibly. Pale pink blossoms opened like sighs, and then, in the midst of a soft spring rain, the child arrived, a girl with golden curls and pale rose-tinted cheeks, who grasped the midwife's finger as though in greeting. A dove flew down from the canopy and landed beside the cradle. She was named Sancha, later known as the Rose of Naples. She would become Queen of Majorca and a patroness of hospitals and orphanages, saying she remembered being born under a tree that wept joy. Today, in a hidden corner of that same villa garden, a single almond tree is said to bloom weeks before any other. So close your eyes and imagine the scent of rain on warm stone, the softness of pink petals falling on linen, and the heartbeat of a queen whispering prayers to the sky. And now we cross the sea, to the pale cities of the Crusader states, where stone walls rise from golden sand and the stars seem brighter over the desert than anywhere else. In the year 1152, Princess Constance of Antioch, granddaughter of Bohemond II, gave birth in a desert stronghold, surrounded by walls scorched by sun and echoes of distant battle drums. Her child was conceived in uncertain times. The Crusader kingdoms were fragile. Rumors of revolt and Saracen siege reached her often, but Constance believed in prophecy and had been told by a hermit monk that her daughter would reunite East and West in grace. So she prepared her birthing room like a sanctuary. The walls were hung with white silks from Damascus, each inscribed with blessings in both Latin and Arabic. A copper basin filled with frankincense and desert rose oil was placed beneath her bed, and polished stones gathered from the river Jordan were cooled in water and laid on her brow. The midwife, a Byzantine nun fluent in Arabic, recited the Magnificat alongside ancient Bedouin lullabies. The child arrived at midnight, under a moon so bright it cast shadows like the sun. A girl with long lashes and dusky skin, her fingers curled as if in prayer. She was named Melisande, after her famed grandmother, and her birth was celebrated by both Christian knights and Muslim poets alike, a brief moment of unity in an age of crusade. She would grow to be a diplomat and healer, remembered for walking barefoot through plague camps, her robes perfumed with rosewater and her eyes always turned upward. And now, dear listener, picture that high desert tower, the wind pressing against silken walls, the sweet tang of rose and smoke, and the whispered lullabies of two worlds woven together in peace. And now, dear one, the stories grow still. The echoing halls of stone fade into twilight, and the voices of queens, midwives, and newborns alike settle into silence, soft as candle smoke. You've journeyed across kingdoms and centuries, through the perfumed birthing chambers of French princesses, across the frost-bitten strongholds of Norway, past the whispering olive groves of Castile, and into yurt-warmed winters in the heart of Hungary. You've heard of herbs hung in doorways, of whispered prayers sewn into sleeves, of queens who bore life beneath stars, of babies born to the lull of bells and storm song alike. All of them, wrapped their hopes in the same silent hope, that the world would be kind to their child, that dawn would follow labor, that light would return even after the longest night. And here you are, resting now in that same quiet stillness. So breathe slowly now, like the wind gliding across the moors, like a curtain fluttering in the high window of a sleeping tower. Let your thoughts soften, like wool spun loose from the spindle. Let the hush of the medieval world, the candle-lit chambers, the scent of lavender and old wood, the distant chiming of monastery bells wrap around you like a velvet cloak. You are safe, you are warm, you are cradled in time. May the angels of old ride the winds above your roof tonight. May your dreams be sweet and silent as snowfall in a forgotten courtyard. And may the stories linger with you, not loudly, but gently, like lullabies hummed by queens and carried by stars. Sleep now, listener of histories. The past will watch over you. Good night.